Hello there YouTube, this is Father Dougal 9000, and today we're taking a look at Sonic Adventure 2 for the Sega Dreamcast. Sonic Adventure 2 was the much-loved sequel to the also much-loved Dreamcast launch title, Sonic Adventure, and was the last Sonic game to be released by Sega on an actual Sega console before the company quit the hardware business. Alongside the original, Adventure 2 is widely considered to be one of the best 3D Sonics and one of the best Sonic games in general. In fact, in an interview with longtime producer of the Sonic series, Takashi Ikuza, I don't know, he stated that Adventure 2, in his opinion, was the closest Sonic team had ever gotten to making a perfect 3D Sonic. And since the original was re-released over 2 years ago on the same services as now, people have been widely anticipating the re-release of its sequel, and now that it's out, it's time to find out how the game holds up after all of these years. Now, before I start, I should mention that unlike most retro re-releases, I actually have played Sonic Adventure 2 before, mainly its GameCube port Battle to absolute death. So for once I will actually be comparing this port to the GameCube version, but the main focus is to see if the game is still as good as I remember it being. And one more thing, ever since playing Sonic Generations, possibly my all-time favorite Sonic game, the flaws in other 3D Sonic games have become a heck of a lot more noticeable to me than before. So please keep that in mind throughout this review. Sonic Adventure 2 is split into two different stories. Hero Mode, where you play as Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails, and Dark Mode, where you play as Dr. Robotnik and two all-new characters, Shadow the Hedgehog and Rouge the Bat. The hero story revolves around how Sonic's been framed for all sorts of crimes and is being hunted down by Mobius's military organization, GUN. However, when he finds out that the true committer of these crimes is somehow related to Dr. Robotnik, he, Tails, and Knuckles set out to clear Sonic's name and save Mobius from yet another of Robotnik's evil plans. The dark story tells the other side of things, where Dr. Robotnik finds a mysterious black hedgehog named Shadow, who tells Robotnik about a strange space colony that requires the 7 Chaos Emeralds in order to activate its true function and conquer the world. So it's up to Robotnik, Shadow, and a mysterious treasure hunter named Rouge to collect the 7 Chaos Emeralds and conquer Mobius. Like the previous game, Sonic Adventure 2 is a linear 3D platformer where the goal is to get from point A to point B. The A button jumps, X and B act as the action button, and Y can be used to switch around actions if you have multiple choices. However, the 3 distinct gameplay styles on offer utilize the controls in different ways, so I'll go in depth on each one. First of all, there's the speed or action gameplay shared by Sonic and Shadow, which focuses on fast-paced platforming and roller coaster thrills akin to Sonic's levels in the original. You can activate the homing attack or forward dash by pressing A while in the air, you can spin dash by pressing X or B while running, and can use the super spin dash by holding either button and letting it go while standing. Next up is the treasure hunting levels from the original Sonic Adventure, where you play as Knuckles and Rouge and try to collect 3 Master Emerald shards by using a radar as you explore many gigantic levels. You can glide by pressing and holding A after jumping, you punch enemies by pressing X or B, and can climb walls by just jumping onto or gliding into one. And finally, there's a third-person shooter section similar to E102 Gamma's gameplay from the original adventure, except this time you play as Dr. Robotnik and, bizarrely enough, Tails in a gigantic tornado mech where you go around shooting as many enemies as possible. The only change for the controls here is that X and B are used to shoot/lock onto enemies. However, you can unlock new abilities by exploring secret areas or backtracking in order to find new accessories that grant each character new powers, such as light shoes which give you the light speed dash for Sonic and Shadow, or a jet that allows Tails and Robotnik to hover in the air for a short while, and more. In each level there are a few secret Chao boxes, the first of which contains a key. If you complete the level after collecting said key, whatever character you played that level in will enter the Chao Garden, a highly addictive life sim where you raise a Chao, a cute little fairy thing, and can do all sorts of things like take it to school, upgrade its abilities with chaos stripes collected from dead enemies and little fluffy animals, enter it in races and karate tournaments, and more. As well as that, when you complete a level, it becomes available on the stage select screen, and not only can you replay it, but you can also take on several new challenges in order to collect emblems, special collectibles that will unlock new extras, and apparently, if you collect all 180 of them, you get a very special extra. Now, by this point, I usually start talking about the good and bad things about this game, but before I do, I have to make something abundantly clear. Whatever I criticize or praise about the game, please keep in mind that all of this is my own opinion, and a very subjective one at that, meaning that this is in no way objective fact. So please, for the love of all sanity, don't get your knickers in a twist if you disagree with me on whatever I say for the rest of this review. Now, I know that this point should be obvious to just about everyone, but I figured I should really hammer this point in for some people considering what we're reviewing. Because, well, like it or not, Sonic Adventure 2 is to the Sonic franchise what Neon Genesis Evangelion is to mecha anime. That is to say, an extremely divisive piece of entertainment that is loved by many people, but is hated or disliked by just as many other people. Many people in the Sonic fanbase love this game for several reasons. Some enjoy how it got rid of Adventure 1's more pointless nonsense like the hub worlds and thankfully Big the Cat. Others have nostalgic feelings towards SA2 since, for the Nintendo fans of the fanbase, this was often the first Sonic game many of them played due to it being the first major Sonic to appear on a Nintendo console, and a few consider the story to be improved from the original adventures due to being somewhat deeper and more focused this time around. However, there are just as many people out there who consider this game to be deeply flawed in many aspects, and is considered by some to be what truly kicked off all the problems that early 3D Sonic games would become infamous for in later years, and would eventually culminate in the also divisive Shadow the Hedgehog and universally reviled Sonic 06. The fact of the matter is that at least 100 people will disagree with me on any one thing I say about this game. Don't believe me? Just check out any recent review of SA2, particularly the one on Sonic Retro, and see how many comments attack the reviewer and their opinions, or at least disagree with them, just because they're different from what we'd normally expect. Now, if you disagree with me about any point I make about this game, that's perfectly fine. That's your own opinion, and you're perfectly entitled to that just as much as I'm entitled to mine. So please try to respect whatever opinion I have on SA2, and I'll respect your opinion on the game even if it's one that's completely different from mine. Now, after all that nonsense, let's finally get on with the flaws and good things about this game. First of all, the English voice acting has quite a few issues, mainly based on the fact that the script was apparently translated from English to Japanese and then back to English, meaning that sentences that flow naturally in Japanese are stilted and awkward in English. Characters sometimes end up speaking over each other, the lip sync does not match up at all, the voices will be drowned out by the loud music on occasion, and the acting in general is pretty poor. I mean, okay, yes, some of the voices suit the characters just fine, but when it comes to actual acting, I'd be better off just watching Dynasty Warriors 3 cutscenes on YouTube.
You challenge me with trickery? I don't believe in magic! Onward!
Great King! Flee!
Oh, Liu Bei! Don't you dare underestimate me! I will leave none of you alive! A dike? Oh no!
Another problem is that there are several sections and levels that are so damn annoying to play through that they make the first game's utterly evil Lost World stage look like a walk in the park. Prepare to be driven insane, my friends, by frustrating pieces of programming like Eternal Engine, that treasure hunting level that you have to complete in less than 5 minutes or you have to do the whole thing again, the final Sonic and Shadow levels, and quite possibly the most annoying mini-boss in all of Sonic history. And actually, while we're on about bosses, most of them aren't all that good. Several of them are the exact same boss with a slightly different model, especially the rival battles. Others have interesting strategies but either go on for too long or are very easy, and some should seriously be condemned to the depths of hell for being so obtuse and frigging annoying. The treasure hunting stages are also a lot more annoying in the first game, mainly because the radar detects one emerald shard at a time, instead of detecting any nearby shard like in the original, which makes levels much longer and more tedious to go through. I mean, sure, some levels like Pumpkin Hill and Meteor Heart are impressively large, but that just makes going through them even more of a chore. And as well as that, the shooting stages are pretty damn boring. Okay, yes, the music in these stages is generally good, but the controls feel stiff and slightly unresponsive, leading to many cheap deaths throughout the duration of the game. And even the action stages with Sonic and Shadow are perfect, as they also have several cheap annoying sections, but the biggest issue, with those stages at least, is when you compare the level design to that of the first game. Alright, let me explain. When I reviewed the original Sonic Adventure over a year ago, I gave a lot of praise to Sonic's stages, and there was a reason for that. The level design in general shared the same spirit of the original Mega Drive stages. Speed wasn't the whole deal, it was merely a reward for going through intricately designed platforming sections, and it was a satisfying reward at that. There was a very tight balance between speed and platforming in SA1, and despite the fact that those stages are a little bit glitchy nowadays, I still enjoy them. And now that tight level design's been replaced in SA2 with very linear levels focused almost entirely on speed, that kicked off the hold forward to win formula that later Sonics would be criticized for. Now, after complaining about pretty much every gameplay type in some way or form, I wouldn't be surprised if you thought by now that I hate Adventure 2. Do I? Well, not really. Okay, let's just talk about the good aspects anyways, and I'll see you in a minute. First of all, let's actually talk about the quality of the port itself. As someone who played the GameCube version at least 1,001 times, I have to say this port is pretty much perfect, at least if you're expecting it to be the same game as the original. The glitches are still around, the graphics are still kinda pointy, and the voice acting's still awful, but if you're a purist who wants to play the game as it was all those years ago, then you'll be quite pleased. And while I do criticize the action stages for not being as platform-centric as the original and having many irritating sections, I will admit that, for the most part, these stages are actually quite fun to play through. Whether you're skating down the streets in City Escape, grinding on massive rails in Skyrail, or doing all sorts of crazy gravity puzzles in Crazy Gadget, there's something about these stages that, when they're not trying to kill you, is actually quite fun. I also like how the developers decided to show the villain side of the story this time around, since it was actually a lot more interesting to see what the dark characters were up to, as opposed to the admittedly bland heroes. Not only that, but the sense of mystery in terms of who Shadow and Rouge were, and their backstories, also made them pretty damn compelling characters, even though the internet would forget about that and only remember Rouge for silly breast physics and Shadow for wangsting all the goddamn time. The music, like all Sonic games, is actually quite damn good. While most of the tracks were really cheesy 80s guitar keyboard madness that would go overboard in later games, when there's a good song in this game, it's really friggin' good. With the best picks being Rouge's jazz themes, the incredibly catchy theme for City Escape, and Mission Street. In this reviewer's opinion, the greatest 3D Sonic theme ever composed. However, probably the best aspect of the game, of course, has to be the Chao Garden. Now, when I was a kid, this was probably the biggest reason I kept coming back to SA2, just to collect Chaos Drives to upgrade the Chao and raise Hero and Dark Chao, and years later I'm doing it all over again. I don't know what it is about this mode, but there's something so utterly addictive and compelling about it that it's just genuinely impossible to put down. Honestly, I'm surprised as the rest of you that Sega haven't brought back the Chao Garden, or at the very least made some kind of handheld spin-off for iOS devices or something like that. In conclusion, I have really mixed feelings towards Sonic Adventure 2. The action stages are fun, the dark story is very interesting, the music is still damn good, as always, and the Chao Garden is the most addictive thing in the world. However, the voice acting, at least for the English dub, is rubbish and has quite a few technical issues. The treasure hunting and shooting levels are an absolute chore to play through, the action stages aren't as fun as those in the original, the bosses aren't that good, and there are many cheap, frustrating, and downright agonizing sections to play through. In all honesty, the whole game is very much in the middle in terms of quality. Some of it's good, and some of it's atrocious. And while I don't consider it to be a poor game, it's definitely one of the weaker Sonics, in my opinion at least. And because of that, I give Sonic Adventure 2 a rating of average, right in the middle when it comes to upsides and downsides, and thus isn't very memorable in terms of game quality one way or the other. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to try to find a safe place to hide from the now livid Sonic fans. Get some weapons and grenades, maybe a couple of sandbags, and erotic Sonato fanfic or tend to distract most of them.